Hello history lovers, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are re-delving into a conflict that is often overshadowed by the larger Vietnam War but was critically important in shaping the modern history of Southeast Asia, the Cambodian-Vietnamese War of 1978 to 1989. This was on to just a border skirmish. It was a full-scale invasion that toppled one of the most brutal regimes of the 20th century. So, how did two nations, once allies in the fight against American intervention, turn on each other in such a dramatic fashion? Let's find out. To understand this war, we have to go back to 1975. In that pivotal year, communist forces triumphed in both Vietnam and Cambodia. In Vietnam, the North unified the country, ending decades of conflict. In Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, led by the infamous Pol Pot, seized power and renamed the country Democratic Cambodia. Now, you might think that two neighboring communist states would be natural allies, and for a brief moment, they were, but beneath the surface, deep-seated historical tensions and radical ideological differences were brewing. For centuries, Cambodia had viewed its larger neighbors, Vietnam and Thailand, with suspicion. There was a long history of Vietnamese encroachment on Cambodian territory, which fueled a strong sense of nationalism and resentment. The Khmer Rouge tapped into this deep-seated fear. Their ideology was an extreme, agrarian form of communism, mixed with a virulent, racially charged nationalism that saw the Vietnamese as a hereditary enemy. They dreamed of restoring the glory of the ancient Khmer Empire, which at its height included large parts of modern-day southern Vietnam. From the moment they took power, the Khmer Rouge began launching brutal cross-border raids into Vietnam. These weren't just military operations, they were massacres. Khmer Rouge soldiers would sweep into Vietnamese villages, targeting civilians in horrific acts of violence, driven by their belief that the land belonged to Cambodia. They called this region Kampuchea Krom, and they were determined to reclaim it through terror. For Vietnam, these constant bloody provocations were becoming intolerable. At the same time, the geopolitical landscape of the Cold War was shifting. The once unified communist world had fractured. The Soviet Union and China, the two giants of communism, were now bitter rivals. Vietnam, needing a powerful ally for post-war reconstruction, aligned itself with the Soviet Union. The Khmer Rouge, on the other hand, received extensive backing from China. This turned Cambodia and Vietnam into pawns in a much larger proxy war. Cambodia became China's foothold in Southeast Asia, a check against Soviet-backed Vietnamese influence. Internally, Cambodia was descending into a nightmare. Pol Pot's regime implemented a genocidal policy to create a master race. They evacuated cities, abolished money and religion, and forced the entire population into labor camps. Intellectuals, ethnic minorities, and anyone suspected of disloyalty were executed. This period, known as the Killing Fields, resulted in the deaths of an estimated 1.7 to 2 million people, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population. Among those persecuted were ethnic Vietnamese living in Cambodia, which gave Vietnam another reason to be concerned. By late 1978, Vietnam had had enough. The constant border raids, the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding next door, and the strategic threat posed by a Chinese-backed Cambodia forced their hand. On Christmas Day, December 25, 1978, Vietnam launched a full-scale invasion. With a force of over 150,000 veteran troops, supported by tanks and artillery, the People's Army of Vietnam punched through the Khmer Rouge's defenses. The Khmer Rouge army, though brutal, was no match for the battle-hardened Vietnamese military. They were equipped by China, but their leadership was paranoid and had purged many of its most competent commanders. The Vietnamese forces advanced with stunning speed. Within just 2 weeks, on January 7, 1979, they captured the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh. The Khmer Rouge regime, which had terrorized the country for 4 years, had been overthrown. But the fall of Phnom Penh was not the end of the war. It was the beginning of a new, grueling phase. Pol Pot and the remnants of his forces fled to the dense jungles along the Thai border. From there, supported by China, and in a strange twist of Cold War logic, covertly by the United States and other Western powers, they waged a relentless guerrilla war against the new Vietnamese-backed government. Vietnam installed a new government in Cambodia, the People's Republic of Kampuchea, led by Cambodian defectors who had fled the Khmer Rouge, including a man named Hun Sen, who remains Cambodia's leader to this day. However, much of the international community, led by China and the United States, refused to recognize this new government. In a deeply controversial decision, the United Nations continued to recognize the Khmer Rouge's government Tainak Zail as the legitimate representative of Cambodia. Their reasoning was that Vietnam's invasion was a violation of national sovereignty, and they didn't want to legitimize a puppet state. This meant the very regime responsible for genocide continued to hold a seat at the UN. For the next decade, Cambodia was caught in a brutal cycle of conflict. The Vietnamese army and the new Cambodian government's forces controlled the cities and major towns. While the countryside and the western border regions became a battleground, the Khmer Rouge, along with other non-communist resistance groups, laid thousands of landmines, which continued to maim and kill Cambodians to this day. The Vietnamese military was bogged down in a difficult counterinsurgency war, facing constant ambushes and attacks in a hostile, unfamiliar jungle terrain. It became, for them, their own Vietnam War. The human cost was immense. While the Vietnamese invasion had ended the genocide, the decade-long occupation and civil war brought continued suffering. The country was devastated, its infrastructure destroyed, and its people traumatized. For Vietnam, the occupation was a massive drain on its already fragile post-war economy and cost the lives of tens of thousands of its soldiers. By the late 1980s, the Cold War was beginning to thaw. The Soviet Union, Vietnam's main patron, was undergoing reforms and reducing its foreign aid. Vietnam, facing international isolation and economic stagnation, realized the occupation was unsustainable. They began a phased withdrawal of their troops. Finally, in September 1989, the last Vietnamese soldiers left Cambodia, bringing the 10-year war to an official end. The withdrawal didn't immediately bring peace. The civil war continued. But it did pave the way for a new diplomatic chapter. The Paris Peace Accords were signed in 1991, leading to a UN-supervised transitional period and elections in 1993. This finally brought a fragile peace to the war-torn nation, though the Khmer Rouge didn't fully surrender until the late 1990s. The Cambodian-Vietnamese War is a complex story with no easy heroes or villains. Vietnam's invasion was an act of aggression that violated international law, yet it also liberated a nation from a genocidal regime. The international response was tangled in Cold War politics, leading to the bizarre situation where the world supported the perpetrators of genocide against their liberators. The war left deep scars on both nations, but it ultimately ended one of history's darkest chapters and set Cambodia on the long, difficult road to recovery. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a crucial but often forgotten conflict. History is complex, and understanding these events helps us better understand the world we live in today. If you found this video informative, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next historical exploration. We'll see you in the next video.